Hey Couch Potatoes, happy Halloween to you. I thought something fun for today would bring back this video I recorded about a year ago talking about my favorite horror movie villains. And since this list hasn't changed since then, I felt it would be a great time to just kind of show it back to you again and show you how I felt about it then and probably still feel about it now. But I would love to hear you guys talk about some of your favorite horror movie villains and if I have them included in the list here. But guys, have yourselves a very safe and happy Halloween. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Happy Halloween. Mike back today to talk a little horror movie villains. This is going to be the off the books for spooky season, where we're going to kind of talk about some of my favorite villains in movies over the years. And obviously, guys, I'm a Gen Xer, so a lot of these are going to be, 80s horror because that's when I first found the genre and stuff like that. But there's going to be a little bit to spread it around. Now, there are going to be some things here where you'll be like, that's not a horror movie, but you'll look at the character and you might be like, okay, but I could see that being a horror villain. So this isn't going to be a countdown per se, because I feel like when I do this as a countdown, people focus so much on where someone was ranked or who was ranked ahead of who, and that's what they let kind of like determine how they feel about it. So what I've decided to do is break it down like I did my favorite sci-fi movies or the books that made me cry. I'm going to break it down into categories here. Those categories are going to be, the first one is monsters and aliens. Then we got animals and sea creatures. Then we got serial killers. And then we got demons and the supernatural. And then I'll finish it off kind of by talking about just like deranged humans, someone who's just messed up in the head, right? I think that's the best way to go about it here. So let's just begin, guys, with the monsters and aliens. Now, when you talk about that, first up, you got to go with the Xenomorphs from Aliens, right? Because I think that those things are absolutely terrifying. H.R. Geiger, what a brilliant, brilliant mind on that guy, right? To come up with the design for these creatures. I love like the clear teeth, the crystal teeth always made it really scary. And then the fact that like it come out like a stapler, it was just messed up. The design on those always drooling. The fact that they're the perfect killing machine, because if you try to shoot it, it's going to bleed acid all over you. If you try to, basically any kind of physical damage, all you can try to do is maybe burn them, but even then it's like, well, is it going to work? So it's just basically, like I said, perfect killing machine. And the fact that they did a horror movie in this franchise to kick things off with Alien was a horror movie, and then Aliens kind of turned into an action franchise after that, and then it just kind of turned into like bad sequel franchise after that. But that's beside the point. You can't take away the pop culture significance of the Xenomorph, and it's just something that has been tried to be copied for forever, and all they could think to do was, hey, let's cross over with Predator, another really awesome design, right? But let's move along here, guys, to my next one, because, guys, there are 20 of these, by the way. I don't know if there's actually a name for it, but it's The Thing. From The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. A lot of people just call it the shapeshifter. So first things first, the first thing that makes it terrifying is that it can take on the shape of someone you know and you don't know. Obviously, that always is going to make something extra scary. I think paranoia is what makes this creature so scary before it becomes the big greasy monster. So with that movie, the special effects just made everything so horrific, and it made this creature just the worst thing you could possibly imagine. I mean, like where the guy's head comes off and then it turns into a spider. I mean, that's just absolutely terrifying. But yeah, I think about the scene where they're trying to test which one of them might actually be the Thing, and it's so much tension, and then when you actually find out which one it is, the reaction is just so good. It's so good because the creature is just so freaking scary. Yeah, something that's aged like a fine wine because of the practical effects just make it even more scary now when you go back and watch that movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies ever. I talked about it last year. I did call it my favorite horror movie of all time. So I don't think that would change here a year later. We're going to have some Stephen King on this list, right? I tried to narrow it down so I didn't just have, 12 Stephen King villains and then a handful of others. I got to go with Pennywise, the dancing clown, obviously. Now, there's no matter which variation you want to do. You want to do the Tim Curry version, or if you want to do the Bill Skarsgård version. I think both of them brought good qualities of the Pennywise in the book. Neither one are near as vicious as the Pennywise book, and you're like, well, Michael, he's killing kids, but still, he's way more vicious about it. Like he's a really mean mutt in those movies, where he's just a vicious pit bull in the books, right? So I think that this, again, the idea that this creature can shapeshift and take on the form of anything that you're most scared of. It knows the things that you're most scared of. It knows your deepest, darkest secrets, and it can use those against you. That idea is terrifying, and the idea that kids can see him and adults can't, like, he could be right in front of you doing something, and the adult's like, "What's going on?" That's terrifying. That you can see things that your parents can't. That's what made him even more scary, I think. But I like both versions of this character. Tim Curry, obviously an icon, a legend in his own right, and I think Bill Skarsgård had impossibly tough shoes to fill there, and I think he did a very good job giving the character its own little spin there. So both versions of Pennywise I love, and obviously I love the literary version of Pennywise every bit as much. So I think they've done him justice as much as they possibly could. And the last monster I got to go with, and in case you didn't know, guys, Pennywise, yes, alien. So it does actually kind of follow that. Now with monster, you're going to be like, I don't know if I'd really consider that a monster. Well, he's under the Universal Monsters umbrella, so I'm going with a monster here for Dracula, arguably the greatest horror icon of all time. Think about it. My mom's never watched a minute of a horror movie. She knows who Dracula is. Is there anybody in the world who doesn't know who Dracula is just off the name alone, right? So many different variations of this character. Bela Lugosi is always going to be the one that I go back to because that's the first one I saw as a kid. But there's been so many great portrayals. Gary Oldman obviously is very, very good. So I can name many. I really stick a lot with Christopher Lee in those old Hammer Dracula films, but it really just kind of depends on what mood I'm in. I feel like all three of those actors play that character in a different way. One's like the romantic, one is just straight vicious killer, and one is just mysterious, I think. So many things. I love that novel by Bram Stoker. So the fact that they are actually able to capture what made that character so special in all these adaptations and all these versions is just really something special, almost as special as the character itself. So you guys want to move along to some nice little friendly pets here? Got some animals and sea creatures. Now, I already consider the ocean very scary, and a big part of that, guys, is because I saw Jaws as a young child. Jaws is always going to be a movie that I'll be watching, and I think, you know what? I'm okay at this age, and he's coming up on the boat, and I'm lifting my feet up off the floor because this is such a scary, scary moment. With me with the ocean, isn't really more about you're scared of sharks. It's more about the open space thing that really bothers me about thalassophobia. But yeah, here's the thing. People still to the day will be like, yeah, the shark looks fake. Well, you know what? The shark looked real enough to keep people out of the water for a long, long time. That movie is just historically significant for basically just scared the hell out of beaches. It killed beach tourism for a few years because it was so terrifying. And Jaws definitely deserves his place amongst the top of the horror icons list without a doubt. Got another Stephen King one here for you. This is Man's Best Friend, Cujo. Now, Cujo's the kind of story that you think, oh, well, it's just a dog. Okay, we've seen killer dogs before, but it's just the idea of that dog was your best friend yesterday, and now it wants to kill your face off. That's what has always made that such a terrifying tale. And a lot of people rag on that movie, but to me, and the fact that they actually had a human in a St. Bernard suit a few times, I didn't even know until I watched the special features. So I think that they did it pretty well. I don't think that if they tried to remake this, that they could do it any better, honestly. Because, I mean, look, guys, that story, 2/3 of it, it's a mom and a son inside of a car trying to avoid this rabid St. Bernard, and the thing about the St. Bernard is like, St. Bernards are basically small horses, guys. I mean, they weigh as much as a human. So the idea of, I'll punch a dog in the face, you're not doing nothing to that dog. So absolutely a horror icon, and made a lot of people scared of St. Bernards for a long time. Took that Beethoven's movie. I think they made like 6 or 7 of those now, Beethoven, to get people to stop being scared of St. Bernards. But yeah, definitely a classic. Then I'm going to go a little classic on you guys here. I'm going to talk about Birds. I'm talking about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. I saw this when I was very young. I saw Psycho when I was probably too young to be watching it, and I got really interested in Hitchcock and just his way of making movies. And I mean, does anybody need to argue about why Hitchcock would be on a list like this? The Birds has always been one of those things, like if you've ever been like outside, say you're like an intersection where there's like power lines and there's just thousands of birds up there, and you're thinking, where they all decide to dive bomb me at the same moment. You know, it's this kind of things that I've always kind of thought of. So when I saw that movie, I probably think that's what influenced those thoughts a few times. Yeah, it's a dated movie, obviously, if you go back to it and watch it now, but experiencing it as a young child, yeah, it traumatized me a little bit to the day that I see, like, you know, a crow or a black bird of any type. I'm like, no thanks, you can just go ahead and stay over there. But yeah, these are fast little critters that can got sharp beaks and can rip flesh, you know, so it makes them very, very scary. They got talons too, you know, so I definitely recommend that movie, even if you just want to go back and see what made Hitchcock so great, because that is one of his best. So move along, guys, to serial killers. Now, you might know a few of these. Now, these are where you get into the ones where people be like, oh, it might not be a horror movie, but I think the characters are quite horrific, honestly. The first one, I don't think there's really an argument. This is Hannibal Lecter. Now, with Hannibal Lecter, not only was it brilliantly played by Anthony Hopkins, just the idea that the guy was just so smart, you know, that's what made it even scarier, is that he was so intelligent and he knew how to break through to, you know, just by talking to you and basically, I don't want to say earn your trust, but kind of lower your guard enough for him to eat your face off, you know. So yeah, just a manipulative character that it really does. I would love to read these books to get to know a little bit more about what makes this character tick, because I mean, I think we've gotten like 3 movies with Anthony Hopkins as him, maybe 4. We've got a TV series with Mads Mikkelsen, which I never watched, but I've heard amazing things about. But yeah, it's a character I think has just been fascinating people for a long, long time, and has just played absolutely wonderfully. And it'd be hard for me to imagine anyone else playing the character, even though I love Mads. So I would actually probably love to check that out. But yeah, that's definitely some books I would love to read, even though I'm not crazy about the hard crime books. I think that'd be one that I could really dive into rather easily. Another good serial killer. This one kind of scared my wife when we were dating. It's because I love history. I love documentaries and things like that. I love researching real life history. And there was a point where I was researching a few serial killers. And my wife's like, oh, why are you doing this? I'm just more fascinated with the history side of it, because I watched a documentary on Henry. This is Henry from Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, played by Michael Rooker, to just bone-chilling perfection. And there's times in that movie where it is so disturbing that, like, you almost have to, like, look away. That's how well constructed this character in this movie were. And it was one of those kind of things, like, where I saw Michael Rooker in anything where he wasn't playing someone sadistic. You know, I think about, this is a guy that played Yondu, you know? This is a guy that played the dad in Mallrats. It's hard to think about because he was just so vicious and cold in that movie. Just the stare that he would give. And when he was stalking people and stuff, and oh my God, when it actually came down to the actual killings, just absolutely horrifying. So that was on my top 10 horror movies as well, because that movie is always stuck in my memory about, you know, just what's stopping a home invasion, you know, if you're in the middle of the night and no one can hear you screaming, you know. It's just a terrifying movie, and it's played to perfection by Michael Rooker in that. Let's move along to Leatherface. Now, does anybody need to know anything about Leatherface? Now, the thing that made Leatherface so scary to me is I believed in the days, guys, pre-internet, you know, we couldn't just pick up our phones and fact check people. If someone told you something was real, you believed it. You know, I mean, I think it was up right until like Blair Witch, where people still believe when someone said that these movies were real, you believe some of these things. Now, I believed that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre actually happened about 3 hours north of where I live in Texas, right? So, yeah, it always made it a lot more scary to me. So when I got the internet in the late 90s and I could actually research these things, I was blown away. No, this is actually isn't. This is based on what Ed Gein. This isn't actually something that happened in Texas, you know. So that's what kind of helped make it. But I mean, iconic, right? I mean, the mask. I mean, I think besides Michael Myers and Jason, might have the most iconic horror mask ever. And of course, that weapon. Even if you don't think about a chainsaw being a little impractical, you know, you hit it with something and it stops. But it didn't make it any less scary in that movie. And that's a very, very visceral movie. And I've heard people say that, you know, they go back to it and they just can't take it seriously now. I don't know. I still find it terrifying. The cheap look, that almost like grainy 8mm look to that movie makes it a little more scary. And Leatherface's extended family there make that movie just absolutely yeah, to watch. But yeah, definitely an icon for sure. I think he's right up there with Michael. He's right up there with Freddy. Right up there with Jason, Pinhead. Right there in the 80s of just like iconic horror villains. And I don't think there's anyone who hears a chainsaw sound like, hey, it's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre going on outside, you know. Or maybe there's not messed up like me. Last serial killer I got, guys, and I talked about Psycho earlier. This is Norman Bates. Now, I think what always stuck with me about Norman Bates, the actor's name is escaping my mind right now, I'm sorry. The way that he would look at the camera and he would say so much with his eyes, and it was not anything nice. It was something very, very chilling about that look that he would give. And I mean, I think I remember back to the trailer, it's just him looking down, and then he like looks up and smiles, and just, oh my God, it would just give a shiver up your spine. And watching, I count the sequels. I know a lot of people don't like to count the sequels, but Psycho 2 and 3 really get deep into what makes Norman tick, and I think they're actually worthy sequels. Obviously, they're not going to touch the original. I mean, it was too many years in between, and that become a horror classic already when they were making these sequels. But I think they gave a lot of depth to the character, and I think they made a TV show of that too, Bates Motel, but I haven't actually watched any of it. But yeah, the original Norman Bates, absolutely scary, scary stuff. And if you haven't watched Psycho up to this point, guys, what are you doing with your life? Get on it. I don't even want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil the ending for you if you haven't heard it. Great, great stuff. So we move along to Demons and the Supernatural. This is going to be the meatiest, I guess, kind of category here because a lot of them fall in this section. Kick things off with a demon straight from hell. This would be Pinhead from Hellraiser, Clive Barker creation. The thing about Pinhead is you think about that first movie, and you know the Cenobites, they weren't even really the villains of that movie. I can't remember the lady's name, but she was the villain of that first movie. But Pinhead was just so popular. He just resonated with so many people in the 80s, myself included. This was a time where I've been watching nothing but slashers, and there was this villain who came in, looked incredible. I mean, the aesthetic was just absolutely amazing, and the actor's voice, the way he talked was just, it would peer into your soul, I swear. And I think they realized how much that resonated with audiences. They said, you know what? Cool story you've got here, Clive, but we're going to do our own thing. Now, that obviously probably didn't really work out because I think not Hellbound Heart, that was a book. What was Hellraiser 2 called? Anyway, Hellraiser 2, pretty good, and that was mostly a Pinhead story. But then you got into the sequels, and they got like Children of the Corn bad. But Pinhead, again, just the look of him, absolutely iconic, and it has one of the greatest scores in a horror movie ever. But just the look of Pinhead is absolutely amazing, and again, horror icon that just, he talked, and the fact that the things that he said just made you shudder because they were so good. So amazing character. Freddy Krueger, guys. I mean, if I was doing this by ranking, look, I grew up in the 80s. Freddy Krueger would be number one on this list because Freddy Krueger was so popular in the 80s. You don't understand. No one took horror seriously. Even in the 80s when it probably had its best, I mean, it's debatable, but it was probably the most popular era for horror was the 80s. If you watch that documentary, In Search of Darkness, there's 3 of them, and they're like 4 hours apiece about how much 80s and horror was just like peanut butter and jelly because, you know, special effects and makeup artists were like rock stars back then. Freddy was so popular, guys, that he took horror into the mainstream. I mean, this was the first time you were seeing like horror movies come out and be number one at the box office because they were such a big deal. Robert Englund was like on Oprah and Arsenio Hall and stuff. He was that popular. So popular, in fact, that they took him from the first couple of Nightmares. He was a pretty scary character, and then he had so much charisma they just couldn't hold him back. And he basically started making one-liners and stuff. And the movies were still entertaining, but they definitely weren't scary. But again, easily, I mean, the argument was always Michael, Freddy, or Jason, who was the best one. I mean, Freddy had the personality, so it was hard not to pick him. And one of the most iconic weapons of all time. You go to a horror store today, like a Party City or a Spirit Halloween store, and what are you always going to see? You're always going to see the Jason hockey mask, the Michael Myers mask, and a Freddy claw, no matter what. So absolutely iconic character. If I had to pick a number one on this list, it would be my man Fred. I mean, I went as him for Halloween for 3 straight years as a kid because Freddy was everything. Let's go ahead and talk about Michael Myers. I talked about him recently when I talked about Halloween Kills. It's a character that just is going to stay iconic forever, and he's never muttered a word. And that's what's amazing about it. And there are rumors already about Halloween Ends is going to have him talk, and I hope that's not true because I've always loved the only thing about the shape that you ever hear is just him breathing. The sound of him breathing in that mask always just makes it just super eerie. And it was weird that I was like, everybody used to be like, yeah, it's a William Shatner mask. I'm like, it doesn't look like William Shatner. But, they shaved the eyebrows off, stained it white, and that's kind of what they came up with. And, yeah, it's amazing. If you watch any documentary on that, they just did a Movies That Made Us on this on Netflix about how they made that mask. And it's such a cool story. And almost like a happy accident. I mean, that whole movie was almost like a happy accident. They never expected it to become the thing it has. And here for 40 years. 40 years, and they are still making Halloween movies, guys. And they've made some bad ones, really bad ones. And the franchise just keeps going. That's what's amazing about it. It just keeps going no matter how bad it is. People just want to see Michael slashing some people up. So the night that he came home, it will never stop being fresh and new to me. Bring it on. Bring on all the sequels. I love them. Then we got to talk about Jason. I'm going to clear out the trifecta here. Jason, obviously, still very much in the pop culture, even though they haven't made a new movie in 10 years, guys. It's been that long. The series has been tied up in litigation forever. I think that we might be seeing a light at the end of that tunnel. I don't know. I think them seeing how this rebooted Halloween is just making crazy money, and they're like, we've got to get in on this. So, I mean, you don't have to worry about, like with Nightmare, I don't feel like they can ever bring it back because no one's ever going to accept anyone not Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. They tried it once with God, what was that guy's name from Watchmen? I'm really bad with names tonight, but it just didn't work. With Michael and Jason, you don't have to have them talk, so you can go back and you can probably just make the same movies again and again and again, and people will keep eating it up. They're just there to see Michael and Jason slice some fools up. But yeah, I mean, it's not hard to find Jason stuff no matter where you go, because anytime you see a hockey mask, that's usually the first thing you go to, unless you live in Canada or something, and hockey is actually like super, super popular. Or up north. It's more popular up north than in the States. I'm in the South. It's not very popular down here. I wish we had a hockey team in Houston. Yeah, I derailed a little bit. But Jason, I mean, you had so many movies of the same thing over and over and over again. I love that they would always have, like, whoever survived in the last movie, Jason killed him at the beginning of the next movie. That was always such a cool thing. But the thing about that is, like, you really, he didn't get the hockey mask until part 3, but it became so iconic that you could never go back after that. They tried to change things. They did with the Jason X or Jason in Space, whatever. I don't even remember. It was so bad. And they tried changing the mask, and everybody hated it. Everybody hated it. So it's like, yeah, you're never going to be able to take the hockey mask away. So again, Michael, Jason, and Freddy are always going to be that trifecta from the 80s that I hold near and dear to my heart. Even the bad sequels, I appreciate all of them for one reason or another. Like, I mean, with Jason, though, I feel like it really hit its stride late. I think 6 and 7 might be like my favorites of those, because it was just right when it was just the right time, I think, for me, when I was old enough to be seeing them brand new for the first time. So I'd love to revisit those. Let's move along to a couple more demons here. First, I got Pazuzu from The Exorcist. I mean, what more do I need to say? I mean, I think that everybody, it's kind of like Dracula and saying that, everybody knows what it is. You talk about The Exorcist, everybody knows what you're talking about. Even if they haven't seen the movie, they know the screenshot. I mean, this movie was humongous back in the day. And then when they re-released it, they called it the version you've never seen. Came out in, I think, 2000. And it made a already creepy movie, even scary. You had the spider walk down the stairs, which made it just terrifying. But yeah, I mean, just an amazing, amazing movie. Technological achievements, kind of thing that's like, I can't believe they got away with making that when they did. It's like, I don't know if they could get away with making this now. I mean, it's just so visceral, so real, and so messed up. And just that voice that they use for the little girl is just yikes, right? I mean, again, you got the pea soup, you got the head turning, the crucifix, all these things that made this just an absolutely horrifying character. Regardless if you were satisfied with who/what the character actually was, it was a very, very terrifying creature in that movie, and it will always stick in my memory forever. The levitating above the bed and the crucifix and the spinning of the head. Oh my God, yeah, good stuff. The last one, this one will be kind of a surprise for you guys, because this one's kind of a deep cut. I'm going to be talking about The Collector. Now, this is from the movie Tales from the Crypt Presents Demon Knight. It was played by Billy Zane. And a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? Look, what I loved about that movie is, like, the script, just okay. Billy Zane, phenomenal performance here. This guy hit a home run. He just had so much charisma. That's a guy that I always felt like was just, he should have been a major movie star. I know he was in Titanic, but I mean, this guy should have been an A-list actor. I always thought he was just a fantastic actor. And with this movie, it's just like he was just, sometimes it's like he's not even in the same movie as everybody else, because he's just embracing the ham, but he also would flip on a dime and he could be evil as shit. So I mean, look, it was just like any other Tales from the Crypt story. It was absolutely campy. The story wasn't really amazing, but you would have amazing performances. And his performance in that, to this day, there's still so many lines that I quote from that movie because Billy Zane was so good. So look that movie up if you want. Yeah, it's 90s cheese. It's Tales from the Crypt cheese, guys, but it is so good. His performance in that is just, he's a rock star in it. Just, I love his performance. Let's close this down, guys, by talking about some Deranged Humans, because I didn't know where to put them. I didn't want to quite put them in serial killer range because, I don't know, I needed more than one person for this category. So one of them probably is a serial killer. The other one, the other two, it's kind of a, there's a good discussion to be had. So let's begin with the one that could probably be a serial killer as well. I'm going with Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. I love Phil Collins, you guys. So that movie really, really resonated with me in more ways than one. But obviously, just the performance. I think that was the first thing I'd ever seen Christian Bale in. And he just hit a home run with it. I absolutely loved it. I still want to read the book. I've got the book. One of my patrons got it for me. I really would like to read that sometime soon. I need to do that next time I got like some downtime, because it doesn't look like it's a heavy read, obviously, at all. And I wonder if it could make that ending make any more sense to me than the actual movie did. I don't know, but again, Christian Bale's performance, I still think to this day that's his best performance. I know everybody loves him as Batman and other things, but I think that, or maybe The Prestige, is my favorite Christian Bale performance. But Patrick Bateman, the idea that you're going to kill somebody because they have a better business card than you, that's so good. That's so good, right? But yeah, but again, all the 80s pop culture references, I love it. You know, Whitney Houston, Huey Lewis, Phil Collins. I mean, this is stuff I grew up on. You know, so many references in that. And yeah, the chainsaw and the sneaker scene, crazy stuff. How about Jigsaw from the Saw movies? Now, I know everybody likes to dunk on the Saw movies and say they're not any good, but I remember when the first Saw came out. I mean, that's what put James Wan on my radar, right? I think that first movie was just fantastic. And it's what a lot of horror sequels do. It's just, okay, let's just, crank the gore up to 11. It really got into that torture porn era of horror that we had there in the early 2000s. But I think the first Saw is a crazy good ending, but Jigsaw, the reason I won't put him as a serial killer is because he's not doing the killing. He's making other people do the killing, right? So that's kind of the technicality you can kind of get away with in it. But just the voice, I want to play a game, stuff like that. I think I realized that I really did appreciate this character when we watched the movie Jigsaw. It was called Jigsaw. I think it came out in like 2015 or something. And just seeing Jigsaw actually be in one of these movies again, I was like, oh, this is great. So I realized I really did appreciate that character for what it did. Yeah, sure, it's been parodied to hell, and the sequels have really watered down what that first movie was. But I don't think you can kind of take away his place in modern horror. It really is an iconic character that everybody recognizes. Even if you're not talking about just the actor who played him, but just the puppet on the tricycle. Creepy stuff, because dolls, creepy, you guys. And my last deranged human here, none other than a Stephen King classic. I'm talking, of course, about Annie Wilkes, the only Stephen King movie to win an Academy Award, played exceptionally well by Kathy Bates. I think to this day, if Kathy Bates walked to my front door, I would scream and lock the door and hide in the closet, because she is just terrifying in that movie, and I think that she just ripped straight from the page. I think that might be one of the best performances ever from a character from the page to the screen of a Stephen King story, of any story really. She absolutely hits a home run. And guys, the scariest part of that book isn't even in the movie. They use a sledgehammer, which somehow makes it more horrifying because of the special effect they use. But yeah, her performance in that, just everything from just being psychotic to, the bipolar, to all that stuff, she really encapsulated it so well. And that's a horror character that will stick in my brain until I become a horror myself, 6 feet under the ground. Isn't that a charming way to end this video, guys?